Hey guys, welcome back and thanks for tuning in to my review of the Klecker designed slice knife. It's a pretty interesting design, particularly this locking mechanism, which I'll try to cover in full during the course of this review and talking about how it works and what it is and all that stuff. And just the design in general, it's pretty cool. It's a pretty interesting knife. I saw this one at SHOT Show 2016, was pretty impressed with it there. I've seen it on their website as well. You can pick this one up for something like $100 or so. That's what I'm seeing it for. MSRP is something like $135, but you can get it for a little over $100. Chinese made, if that's a big turnoff to you, there you go. The steel on it, 12 C27. I wanted to say 14 C28N, which is what you get here on this knife from Kershaw. Also USA made. 14 C28N, in my opinion, is a little bit better. I think it's designed to be better as sort of an evolution of 12 C27, if I'm not mistaken. So 14 C28N, in my experience, is a fantastic steel. I've loved using it on the Leak and a handful of other great knives. So I would rather this probably had that one, 14 C28N, but 12 C27 again is related, so it performs pretty well. We'll talk about the performance of it, peppering in some cutting tests and all that stuff throughout the course of this review. But let's talk a little bit about the features, the form, the function, the unique look and the unique design of this knife from Klecker Knives. So just kind of getting into the blade shape first off, we see that it's a very interesting modified tanto shape. Kind of a recurve right here going on, which has got a sort of a Michael Hawk kind of look to it. If you've seen any of his knives or the knives that he's designed, they've got these sort of real like recurves right here and then this crazy two-edged. Anyways, that's sort of what I'm reminded of here, but it's also got a very Klecker feel to it as well. The interesting thing is that you've actually got a belly right here on this part of the tanto blade, and then the sort of a very mild, almost rounded tanto point right there, and then once again this sort of recurve coming up here, a gentle recurve, and you can see that it's also hollow ground throughout the blade, and a little swedge cut out there, and then obviously sort of a drop going on there, following a nice curve from there to tip, from butt to tip. So that's really cool. What we have up here seems to be like, it's not really a finger choil meant for you to lock your finger in, but it does sort of give you a little bit of a safety area there. So it does kind of act as a choil-ish. And for me, it's a good spot to sort of disengage the lock. As I press this, and I kind of have to press it hard to get this to disengage all with one hand. Press that down hard and it will sort of drop. You can get that to drop and it looks like it wants to chop my finger, but it's actually stopping in that sort of safe area right there and not cutting me. So that's one way you can disengage it. It could be give you a little bit of a jump at first when that drops, because it drops very quickly, but it won't cut you. And you can see there is also a flipper on it. It's a flipper and a lockback. Isn't that crazy? As far as deployment is concerned, because it's a lockback, what you get is kind of a quick flick right that came out faster than almost any other time I've done it. But it comes out kind of fast there, but it wants to slow down because the spring is actually, it needs to overcome that locking spring in order to get into that locked position. So that's something to kind of note. It does flip. It flips like any other flipper, but it doesn't have all that momentum all the way out. It actually sort of gets slowed down as it reaches that open point. Something worth noting, I guess. It does ride on ball bearing pivots. I'm not sure if you want to call that the IKBS or some other type of ball bearing pivot, but I can tell that is extremely smooth. It is a ball bearing pivot. If I didn't point this out, there's the Klecker Knives logo, TG14, on there as well. And the patent, of course. And the Klecker Knives icon right there, very cool looking. So let's try to, you can see other design points there. I don't really need to talk too much about them. I do need to talk about the pocket clip, which sits here and nowhere else, not repositionable. So for those of you that really want it on this side, lefties, or really like carrying tip down, not possible unless you do some major modifications. It does have a lanyard hole though, and so there's that. Kind of a smallish one. Is it small? Let's see how it is compared to this guy right here. Yeah, it's a little bit smaller. than maybe your average lanyard hole, but I'm pretty sure you can still force some paracord through there if you wanted to. Let's talk a little bit about that lock, which is, once again, very interesting. So as I said before, it operates like a back lock does, as far as from the operator's standpoint. But at the same time, it doesn't. So let's look at a standard back lock. Here's the Spyderco Delica. And the Spyderco Delica is a standard back lock. I mean, it might be slightly modified, where if you want to talk about the old buck knives and how they've got the lock button way back here on the tail of the knife, and the hinge pivot is somewhere over here or something like that. Spyderco kind of moved that pivot, or that hinge, way up here so that you can lock that or depress that lock more easily with one hand. So, but it's still very much a traditional back lock in that it is, just one piece of metal coming through here and hinged right there. It's got some, a spring back here someplace that sort of forces it up, or something like that, or down, or whatever. Yeah, it forces it up, kind of comes down here and forces it up. But that's basically how a back lock works. And Klecker has changed all of that. Glenn Klecker's changed the whole concept of that. It doesn't work that way on his knife. What he has instead is one frame. Okay, the frame and the handle are one. And the way he's built this is, he's kind of cut out parts of that handle to create the spring within the handle. So this is where it's really, really kind of groundbreaking and interesting, and why I really admire this knife above so many others, and even admire it beyond its price point and accept its price point, even though it's made in China, even though the steel isn't the good steel that I want. It's really, really interesting because of all that. As you can see, like I said before, that's all cut out from the frame. You can see that's true on both sides and cut out in the same way and in the same shape. So what he did there, in order to give you a little button to depress, what he did is he sort of wedged in there and sort of attached this little piece right here with that jimping on it that allows you to sort of press down, depress the lock like so. And the function of that lock, as you see, you just saw it engage right there. You've got that little lock pin, so you've got a stop pin right there and the actual lock pin embedded between the two pieces of frame. So as we look at that lock and watch it engage, you see that this part of the tang right here engages with the stop pin at the same time that part of the tang down there engages with the lock pin. So they are pretty securely locked in place and don't seem to be going anywhere. And that seems to be a good, strong lockup. During the course of the testing that I did with this knife, and I did a fair amount, both some paper slicing, some cardboard slicing, some wood carving and all that stuff. And during the course of that, I didn't find that there was any issue with that lock, and seeing it potentially come undone or come unlocked in any way, that never seemed to be a threat. I will say though, as my thumb, or as the web of my hand kind of engaged with this area right here, that did sort of depress all of that, because there is room in there, as you can tell. There is room for compression right here. That can sink down a little bit. That can sink down a little bit. If you're really bearing down on this, some of that can sink in. However, it should not sink in and end up releasing that. What it should do instead is actually press it down maybe even harder. So you'll get some of this disengaging or pressing down right there, and some of that compressing ever so slightly. But you shouldn't get any kind of a disengagement of that lock if you're, once again, sort of putting your weight, the weight of your hand right there in the web of your hand, and kind of pressing into whatever it is you're cutting. In my case today, slicing through some of that pine. It sliced very well, by the way, through that pine. I think it was able to bite into it pretty nicely. That recurve, it does give you some advantages, I gotta say. While you could say that it's a little more difficult to resharpen because of the fact that it's not quite as flat and straight across right there, and if you're sharpening on something like the Spyderco Sharp Maker, and you've got a flat surface that you're trying to engage with a surface that isn't completely flat, it kind of curves. Yeah, it can be a little difficult, but you use the sharp side of the triangle, and you can get virtually all the sharpness you need from that. So it still works. Slicing cardboard also, once again, that recurve digs in. It just kind of hooks in and kind of grabs and continues to tear through whatever it is you're cutting. So again, there's big advantages to having a recurve like that. It's not just, oh man, it's hard to resharpen. You know what? It also works for you. It works harder for you. So that's a very cool feature. Slicing paper obviously did pretty well. I will say that, from the factory, it came very sharp, like razor sharp. Through daily use, I saw some of that dull a little bit. And then resharpening it, it was hard to get it back to the exact razor sharpness that it was at. So some of the paper slicing maybe might have hung up on that just a little bit. But that's, I don't know. It really comes down to, can you resharpen this knife effectively? And if you can, you'll have all the sharpness you need. The very unusual and original locking mechanism, as well as the beautiful looks, really team up to bring you a cool knife from Glenn Klecker and Klecker Knives. The price is a little up there for a Chinese-made knife that's 12C27. I'd like to see a slightly better steel and USA made, but then you're probably going to see double the price. So if you're into it, given the looks and given the interest of that lock, it is, it's a pretty cool knife. The weight on it is what I never mentioned that, about 4¼ ounces. Well inside of what I think is acceptable for daily carry. And again, I did daily carry this knife for a few weeks. Very comfortable in pocket, very useful in all the tasks I put it to. The fact that it's a flipper and a lockback, you couldn't really have a flipper and a lockback without that redesign of the lockback system. But that is very cool. It means that you don't have to pinch the blade to pull it out. You can actually flip and get your blade out very effectively and very quickly. And so that's really cool. So Glenn, good job on this. It's a very well-designed knife and very cool. If it's not available in a higher quality steel, I'd like to see it available in a higher quality steel. And if it hasn't been produced in the USA, that would be cool to do someday. But I understand that maybe it's not within range today. All right, guys, that is my review of the Klecker Knives Slice. It is a very interesting knife, and I hope you'll check it out. And I'll leave a link down below for a place where you can check it out. Thanks again for watching. I'm the Late Boy Scout. We'll see ya.
This knife here, it's got the lock mechanism also built in, but we gave it kind of more of an industrial kind of look. It's got gunmetal gray with G10 layered inserts, brown and black, and then it's got a drop point with a recurve.